Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to be here and to have you all here virtually to celebrate the work of Bill Ayres and the release of his new poetry book, What Passes for Wisdom. I'm Kendra McDonald. I'm a poet and teaching artist here at the Muse Writer Center. And I want to take just a moment to tell you a little bit about the Muse Writer Center. We are one of the largest literary centers in the country. We offer online and in-person creative writing classes for all genres, of all levels, and for all ages. Our new fall schedule will be released. Actually, I think it is live, but keep checking our website any day for the full roster of classes. You can go to the-muse.org and find all of the classes that are available. I want to mention that we also offer tuition assistance for anyone who needs it. We do not turn anyone away. And last year we gave away almost $30,000 in tuition assistance. We don't want anyone getting it. We don't want tuition getting in the way of someone who wants to learn to write, which is what we're here for. So you are here to hear Bill Ayres, and I want to welcome this reader. Bill wrote a little bit of an introduction, which I will share, and then I want to make a bit of a personal comment. But Bill Ayres has spent his life running or helping to run bookstores. It's been fun. He's been married to his wife, Gayle, for more than 30 years. That's been even more fun. He's studied at Virginia Wesleyan and at the Muse Writer Center. His poems have been published in Commonweal, the Anglican Theological Review, Hoot, the Roanoke Review, Bird's Thumb, Sal's Ear, Jelly Bucket, Plainsongs, and a lot of little magazines you've never heard of, he says. Bill is humble like that. I'm so honored to be able to introduce Bill tonight because I have known him as a writer through poetry for, I think, 18 years. And I've been able to write alongside with him, get to read his work and see the poems come to fruition and ultimately birth this book that he's about to present and debut. So it's my pleasure to have you all welcome Bill Ayres and his debut collection.
Thank you, Kendra. Thank the Muse. I want to thank the people who pre-ordered this book. It means a lot. It's at the printers now. There'll be copies by the end of the month in bookstores, and you'll be able to, and I have copies, and you'll be able to get it from Amazon. But don't get it from Amazon, support your local bookstores. So I'm going to read one poem because it will help people to understand when I do a little explanation. And then I'll go right into well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. But this, Victuals and Speech, is the first poem I'm going to read. And the explanation is, when I was born, my grandfather, my mom's dad, was 65, and he said he was too young to be called Grandpa. So we had to call him Po-Pop. Victuals and Speech. The lungs and the belly fork off the same passage, because food and talk go together. There are ways that we express ourselves. Either can choke you or nourish you. There is texture to both. Consider how cuisines and languages perish in tandem, leaving no corpses. Both are learned in the kitchen, not in the dining room, a feast or a nibble, a word or a story, the hot, the sweet, the bitter, forgotten as quickly as you lick them off your teeth. In my family, we make a paste of vinegar and sugar to put on our waffles. We eat pickled peaches. Here, take this in your mouth. It is something Po-Pop used to say. If you look for flowers, you'll find flowers. If you look for weeds, you'll find weeds. Push that around with your tongue. People like to give you advice. You know, they say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. They say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. They tell you there's more than one way to skin a cat, which sounds really creepy, but it's a catfish they're talking about. So the first poems in this book are about that kind of sayings that people are always quoting. I'll start with a few of those. Better a bird in the hand than two in the bush. As long as you aren't afraid, he will scratch his way free. Hold tight, even if your knuckles get pecked. Get some water boiling. Be ready to pluck all those feathers. Better a bird in the hand if you're hungry. If your belly is full, you don't mind it so much when the sparrows flit out of the boxwood and disappear into the sky. Wedded virtues. Cleanliness will not tell you how close she is to godliness. She doesn't need to talk. They have been together for so long. Their children have grown up and made names for themselves. She is wise enough to know she could be making the bed one morning and find a long, dark hair on a sheet so white it glows. As much as she trusts her husband, sometimes cleanliness thinks about charity. The way she reaches out to everyone, how when she meets godliness, she hugs him or squeezes his arm. She is affectionate, that one. Even godliness can be tempted. Cleanliness will be the first to tell you things change. Some things you learn too late, or if you're lucky, nearly too late. Dark chocolate, not apples, keeps the doctor away. Slow and steady isn't allowed on the racetrack. And what doesn't kill you, which used to make you stronger, makes you fat. Dig your well before you are thirsty. Not that the creek is dry, but you've pretended long enough that day won't come. What you dip out of it is 2 parts sand. Time to decide where you will want that hole and how to make it with the least amount of work. Near the house would be good, but right now what's important is that you find where water is near the surface. Once you have picked a place, gather your tools, a shovel, a bucket, a coil of rope, a metal bar long enough to lay over the mouth and throw the rope across. Next, pull your gloves on, grab the shovel, push the blade in, kick it loose and lift. Don't try to work too fast. You'll be at this a while. In 4 days or 5, you might strike water. By then, you will be used to being stiff and tired. You will be used to being in the throat of what you're digging. You won't admit the hours of working in the dark make you think maybe you're going blind. Filling the bucket up with dirt, pulling the rope to take it to the surface will become automatic. When you find your boots and socks are soaked, that water is rising to your knees, you will, at first, be furious. People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. I'm not the chunk of quartz you threw to scare the homeless man. That one has blood on it. I am a fist-sized piece of granite, chosen for heft from what lined a flower bed. Carried here and hurled, I am still dizzy and throbbing from my journey through your plate glass window. The noise it made and shattered glass everywhere. Shocking the difference between the warm of your den and the cold outside, though it grows less every moment. You don't look at me. You stare into the dark, overcome by the weight, by the number, by the sizes and shapes of the rocks that litter this world.
Mm. Excellent.
When she was 83 years old and blind, Virginia Hamilton Ayer published her first book of poems, Ants on a Melon. It's wonderful. There's going to be a quiz later. So, actually, that she's mentioned towards the end of this poem. So better you know and don't have to Google it later. This one comes with a scar. Haste makes waste. Sliced open my finger early this morning, cutting up onions to go in my eggs. Wasted a bunch of paper towels. Had to hold my hand over my head to get it to stop bleeding. Washed it, dabbed it with ointment, wrapped a Band-Aid around it. Had to wipe up the blood on the counter. All this put me behind. Though I was hurrying to work, I noticed you, Barbara, pacing your driveway, cell phone to your ear. You had locked your keys in the house and were calling Jack to come let you in. You, Ryan, I saw on the shoulder of the highway. You'd failed to check the needle on your gas gauge. Kate, I saw you, frantic, retracing your steps. You'd left your wallet on the grocery store counter. Since I woke up this morning, I've been making mistakes. Or maybe, at last, I've recognized when I am doing things wrong. Now, when I should be keeping my eyes on the car in front of me, I see all of you who are limping because you didn't take the time to look where you were going. Each one of you who has an arm in a cast, every single person who has to take a minute or 3 to get out of your chair because of that injury weeks or months or years ago. No, we haven't met, but I know you. More than those I see at church on Sunday or twice a week at the gym, more than my own family, more than the other guys who go out on their kayaks, more than the few of us who revere the name Virginia Hamilton Ayer. I know you. I know all about you. You are my people. This one scares me. The face on the clock. Once, even I couldn't tell my left arm from my right. Time confused everyone before I bit the fingernails of one hand down to the wrist. Now, afraid of my hunger, he wants to bend at the elbow and hide behind my back. It moves slowly. It's all I can do to keep it straight. There's a section of this book called Bible Stories, and I've got a couple from that section. One's semi-normal and one isn't. You get to decide which is which. 2 blessings. I want the rain to be your friend, trembling the leaves of your tomato plants. I want its rhythm to fill your songs. Thirsty, may you swallow all you want. On hot, cloudless days, may you splash out and swim in the cool, dark deep. But more than that, I want you to be like Esau, who, when offered flocks of goats and sheep by the brother who had cheated him, was able to refuse Jacob's gift. Though he lived far from the dew of heaven, though it was so dry his tongue stuck to his teeth, He could embrace his twin. He could say, I have enough. Zigzag, dry, bleached white, they covered the floor of the valley. How they came there, what disaster met those people is not recorded. All we know is Ezekiel preached to their bones, and they responded to the word of God. Parts that had been splintered, pitted, parts that had been ground into dust, worked free of the sand and dirt, took their old shapes, became whole. Tibias, kneecaps, femurs, jaws, skulls, the small bones of the hands and feet, disc of the back, humerus, radius, all separated by vultures picking them apart, by wolves, dogs, rodents, gravity, and rain, found one another joint to socket, rattled together, became green, marrowed somehow, bound up with sinews, muscle, skin, as the prophet called for breath that they might live. They marched naked across the desert, away from muttering Ezekiel, not even knowing they would need water and food. The new skin on their shoulders was pink within minutes. All of them were children, even the wrinkled ones who stroked their beards, squeezed their limbs. They were afraid that in the haste of creation, some bones had been confused, women's with men's, that specks of grass or bits of bug had been swept up and lodged in their bodies before skin grew to cover them, that parts of them might be the horns of cattle or the teeth of dogs, that even from the beginning, they weren't pure.
Mm. No.
Erica Smith at the Virginia Pilot put a notice in the paper about this book launch on Sunday, and she must have liked this one because she quoted from this in her little notice. So, when we paid off the mortgage, I opened my closets and said to my clothes, "You can stay." I announced to the furniture, "You won't have to move again." I wandered the house, banging my knuckles against the walls, running my fingers along the counters, bending down to put my palms flat on the cool hardwood floor. Mine, mine, mine. That's what I did yesterday. Now, outside, it's time to put away my tools. After power washing mold off bricks, mowing grass, trimming hedges, I push myself to a stand after leaning on you, Pin Oak. I step back and look up at your height. From the shades you cast, how can it be that I own you? Can I own the cloud above us or the rain that is starting to fall? We're getting down to it. I got 4 more. The astronaut's body. Up, down, words without meaning. I only know there's no need to work hard to push blood to my head. No need for these muscles, these bones. Here, they're a burden. I let them thin. They flow away in my urine. From now on, our float. I can barely remember what it was like to rise, to walk, the effort it took to clamber to my feet. Now I read a love poem for my wife. No one will ever be this close to me. You lift my shirt tail and plunge upward, till your head emerges through my collar. Your arms are under mine. The fabric stretches as we rearrange ourselves. Breathing together, our smells mingle. It is a wonder our legs don't tangle. It is a wonder that leaning into each other, we stay on our feet. Bless the doctor's white coats. May the color, the fabric, the cut, make those who put them on smart, curious, ready, and able to heal. May the sight of those garments give patients comfort. That's the clothes of the rest of us, the policewoman's badge hanging crooked, half torn from her blouse, the big red hat of the fireman with the crack along its crown, the jeans the roofer peels from his body when he gets home, stiff with tar and sweat. If it is possible, may our shoes make us quick. May what we pull up around our waists make us strong. May we put on confidence as we dress for work. Most of all, bless the flesh we have in common beneath what we wear. May our skin glow. May our limbs, toes, and fingers be graceful. May our organs and senses do what they do joyfully. May we be humble and gentle and kind to the marrow of our bone. Last one. St. Pops. The faded sky you keep in the window frame is not the blue of the big sky, not the color Louis Armstrong was looking at when he put his horn to his lips and his eyes rolled back in his head. Not the blue of the reverberating heaven where Louis plays now, where the angels join the hot five on the chorus, and every saint listens for the cue to start the solo. Some playing clarinets, some trombones, drums, banjos, tubas, guitars, pianos. God taps his foot and nods his head. Everybody is grinning, brighter than halos. Everybody does the sugarfoot strut, and everybody gets their chance to shake the sky in loud, loud heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was fantastic. What a pleasure to get to hear those poems come to life in your book. I didn't announce at the beginning, but anyone watching is certainly open to asking Bill questions. We'd like to have a little bit of a discussion time now after this reading. You can enter your questions in either the event page of the Facebook event, the Muse page, or YouTube comments. So please ask Bill some questions. But I just want to say, Bill, that like there are just so many amazing lines in this collection, and that reading that you did, just so many things stuck with me. But I absolutely loved the "You are my people" line in the Virginia poem, and that's truly how I feel with the Muse too. Right? We are with our people, and you are my people. So thank you, Bill, for reading that. Also, I was thinking a lot about just poetry during this time that we're in, and it really struck me on one of your last poems, the line, "Maybe be humble and gentle to the marrow of our bones," if I'm getting that correct. But what a beautiful, beautiful line. So I do have a question coming in. This is from Manny, and he or she, forgive me, wants to know, what is the significance of your title?
That's a good question. It has to do with the with the first section of the book, where you hear these quotes, and it was always interesting to me, when I read like Shakespeare, he is always, for some reason, he's always cautioning us not to trust the articulate. And it's like, what's an interesting thing for someone who is so articulate to be saying? So it's just, always think about what, what comes down. There's probably something there, but weigh it and check it out, before you just swallow it whole.
I like it. Yeah. So what does pass for wisdom, right? I feel like in knowing your work as much as I do, I have been lucky to know your work, but you are drawn to parables and proverbs. So like my question for you is, how do you grapple with taking something that is kind of so well known, like the bird in the hand, and turning it into a poem that's so kind of fresh and spun on its head? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, in that particular poem, it was when I saw some birds fly out of a box lid.
So literally.
Literally, yeah. And there was another one. It occurred to me driving home, one day, and I don't know why, that there's a saying, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And it occurred to me that saying could be applied to a woman. It was not just this or that, but, and so then I had to play with that and make it make sense.
I see. Yeah. So just sitting with that and kind of thinking about all the different possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question from Jenny, who says, your poetry seems philosophical, even the poems about the Bible. Do you consider yourself a philosopher? It's a multi-part question. Do you consider yourself a philosopher, Bill? Do any of your poems come from questions or curiosity?
Yes, my poems come from questions and curiosity. Generally, they come from questions and curiosity. Now, I think to say they come from that's the same as a philosophy. Yeah, I mean, there is something to that, but it's also the same place that comedians draw from. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. So are you skirting the philosopher question?
I guess I am.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think that there's probably, a link between philosophy and poetry in some way. Yeah. Any other questions? We're waiting for them to come in. Again, feel free to ask questions. I'm going to kind of follow up with another question for you. Again, this has been such sort of a strange time this year, and it's great to be able to celebrate this book launch virtually. But of course, we miss that in-person time. But as far as writing and creating art during this time, Bill, can you talk a little bit about what has helped you? Has poetry helped you during this time? Have you found it easier to write or more difficult to write?
That's a good question. I've been reading more poetry lately, and I have been writing, but I haven't written much about the pandemic lately, which is, I feel like I'm avoiding that for a second. I don't mean to avoid what I write is what comes to me. And I have been thinking about that. I've got like two neither of which are very good, but I am drawn more to poetry. I, I considered for this, dragging this over and having it in front of my enormous bookcase. But then I thought, well, what if I can't get the router back or something? So I've got some of my poetry books back there.
Yeah, I love it.
Just so you know. But yeah, I've been reading more and
Yeah. No, I have been too. I feel like this has been, I mean, I think, as poets and as writers, we generally do poets read poetry, but I think there's been something, especially during this time, that has made me want to read more poetry, whether it's for comfort or answers or something. So I'm very excited to hold your proverbs and wisdom in my hand as well. And also the Muse had an event, a diversity event earlier today, and a question kind of came up about that. You said, I'm not really writing poems about the pandemic, but that there was kind of a further philosophical discussion on maybe just writing during this time, whether it's about the pandemic or not, is still documenting this time, that we're in. So I think there's something to be said for that as well.
Yeah, you notice different things. Seems like lately I've been writing more, not exactly nature poems, but well, yeah, nature poems. Because I've been noticing that more because I've been outside or looking, nose against the window at goldfinches and such. So.
True. Like a little bit more observant, maybe. Yeah. So we have a comment. I have a comment from Patty who wants to say, that's my pop-up he's talking about, which I love. And I think that probably is a reference to the first poem you read.
Yeah, pop-up. Yeah.
That was an amazing poem. What was the title of that one?
Victuals and Speech.
Victuals and Speech. Yeah, I absolutely loved that idea of also being too young to be grandpa and the different names that we give our elders. So that was Patty, and then we have Charles Wilson with a compliment, who basically just wants to say that you had a splendid presentation, and I'm actually gonna ask Charles to ask you a question. So Charles, that's my plea to you to send Bill a question. I'm calling Charles out because we at the Muse are part of a poetry studio that we've been in for a long time as kind of working poets, and it's a pretty incredible experience to meet monthly and really get to know each other's work and voice and style. So we'll see if Charles comes up with a question for you, but it was a compliment. And then Sean asked a question. We know that you have spent most of your life working in books and around books constantly. So Sean wants to know, of the 7 bookstores you've worked at, what was the most unique of the 7?
I don't know that any one of them stood out as that much different, but things have changed over the years, and with technology, and because I remember when, instead of placing an order on the computer, we wrote down what we wanted and we made a phone call to the distributors, and when people came, mass market representatives who'd come to the store and say, hey, these were things. And that's so different. There was a time when you got a book, a hardback book, you turn to the back of it and you'd write in the month that you received it. So when you went and you looked to see, oh, that one's been here for 6 months, it's time to send it back. It hasn't been bought, because the shelf life of a book is somewhere between milk and cheese, which has been true since T.S. Eliot said that a long time ago.
Wow.
So things have changed, but it's always interesting. There's always stuff that comes and goes. There's trends. I remember when the Satanic Verses came out.
Mm-hmm.
And
Salman Rushdie.
yeah, and the Ayatollah Khomeini said they should bomb the bookstores that sold this. So it was like, these people are working here. They could die,
Right.
and everybody, like every American, had to have a copy of that book because they were told they shouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know how many read it. It's a good book. Salman Rushdie is a very good author, but it's all been very interesting. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but there's something wrong with me because I like to be busy, and it's very humbling that people come in and say, "What should I read?"
Right.
And you never know if they're asking for books on nuclear physics or how to grow peas, so I have this much expertise in a little bit of everything. So.
Yeah. I think that comes across in your work, definitely. I know being surrounded by books, as you are, and being such an avid reader, I think that really comes across in how you experience poetry. It's funny that you mentioned the kind of idea of, the Salman Rushdie and, don't read the book and how everybody needs to have it. But I think that really speaks to the power of words, right? And I think poetry definitely has that. So we have a great question from Shannon Curtin, fellow poet, and she wants to know, Bill, is there a proverb or a saying that you especially like a mantra or something that sticks with you personally?
There are a number of them. I have a personal one that's just for me, which is, a tired Bill is a stupid Bill. So if I get really tired, I try not to make decisions because they'll probably be bad ones. That and another personal one, don't change lanes unless you've got a really good reason, because you might cause an accident. But no, I mean, there are a lot of them that speak to me, and there's plenty that you don't hear, and that from different cultures. The ancient Egyptians had a proverb that said, "Happiness is a mouthful of beer," and I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Happiness is a mouthful of beer. So in working through the book and kind of working through the section that is the various proverbs, did you find any others that surprised you, or one that you included that you weren't really familiar with and kind of led you down a rabbit hole of research or anything of that nature?
Well, the first book of Proverbs is a proverb that I think comes from the stock market that says, "Don't try to catch a falling knife." And that was an easy one to write because it's a bad idea. But
yes, I remember that poem very clearly, and you definitely took it very literally. Don't try to catch a falling knife. Yeah. So I know one of the things I really admire you for in your poetry is that you take the idea of a persona poem. It blows my mind because you can embody a inanimate object so well and give voice to inanimate objects and dogs and various animals. Has that always been something that has come naturally to you, or does that come from your reading, or where does that come from?
You're right. I've done that for a long time. Um, I think that sort of comes naturally
Yeah.
to me. There are a lot of people who do personae um, poems, but usually they're people. Whereas I'm more
Right.
likely to be, you know, a drop of rain
Mhm.
or a flag or something or an earthworm, and
Mhm.
that's a little more fun um, because an earthworm has a lot to say for itself, and you realize, or nitrogen, nitrogen. People don't appreciate nitrogen, and it's starting to resent it.
It's starting to resent it. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, I really admire that. I think that's an incredible skill to be able to imagine the voice of these things, and you do it really, really well and capture the poems so well. We have a question from Samantha, who wants to know, when did you first start writing poems? Did it come during your college years, or was it earlier in your life?
college was when I Yes, college was when I became serious about it. I'd done a little bit in high school, but really, college was when I took it up. Bruce Guernsey was teaching there. He's one of the people who wrote blurbs on the back of the book, and he was good at it. And some of the other people at Wesleyan were good at it. And of course, after that, I got together with some other people, and then for a long time, I was sort of a lone ranger until I had sent something out and for one of these contests, and they said, "Well, try again next year. You're a finalist." And it's like, well, maybe I should. So I went to Vivian Teeter at Wesleyan and said, help me," and she got me together with you and Helen, and we were together for a number of years before we got up with the Muse.
Yeah, so many years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned that, because I know that you've been writing for such a long time, and I consider you somebody that is so dedicated to your craft, and you're a prolific writer, Bill. You have this book represents just a small fraction of your poems, and um, it seems to me like you must have a daily writing practice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't have a daily writing practice. What's I go along and then something um, grabs a hold of me, and I used to. When I got an idea, I'd get it down and I'd start working on it, because if you don't write it down,
Right.
it might just evaporate. And I still, write down, the kernel, but more lately I've let things sort of work in the back of my head for a while, and
Mhm.
then I discover it's sort of half written. I don't have to do 45 drafts anymore. It's
Mhm.
be down to a dozen or so.
Yeah.
So sometimes it seems like I have the best luck when it's like, well, there's nothing there. Maybe I never have another idea again. And the next day I have three. And so I probably average about three poems a month.
Okay.
Um, and yeah, they come when they come.
Yeah, that's excellent. Three poems a month is excellent. And I know you've been, like you said, writing for a long time, and having that courage to send the first thing kind of out in the world. So maybe I just want to ask too, just about kind of that process of being persistent, of sending work out. And maybe some advice that you would give someone who's in who has maybe their stack of poems and they don't know what to do with them, but they are trying to work up the courage to send them out. What would you say?
Well, read a little bit of what's out there, and then just get it out. These days it's so easy to send things out, but you don't want to waste your time or the time of the magazine if you're sending your nature poems to a magazine that only does poems about eggs. You've got, if you read and realize that what they're interested in is eggs, those souffle poems, that's what you need to send them. So.
Absolutely. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did send a dog poem to an animal journal. Is that correct?
I did.
Yeah.
I've done some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a good advice, knowing the audience. So we have a question. I think it also might be from Samantha, and she wants to know, so what's your next poem about? You might have a few things in the works. What are you stewing on right now?
I've got the idea of writing a poem about why we're fascinated by murder and all the murder novels, mystery novels, and all the TV series is that are about. There's not a lot of murder going on. You notice that Jessica Fletcher, wherever she goes, every week somebody dies. I would, if she moves to town, leave. It's so I don't, and like I say, whether I actually write that poem this week or next year, it's it's there somewhere.
It's stewing. I love the way your mind works. Excellent. All right. So I think we're going to maybe have one final question. So this is also from Sean, who wants to know, I'm just going to ask it the way he asked it. So I don't know if he's saying poetry or fiction or any genre, but as a bookstore guy, what should I read? What's on your reading list? What should I read?
What's next? Shoot. Oh, man. There's some good stuff coming out. Oh, nuts. What's the name of this? Like the Million. It's a good question. It's a good question to ask me because they send us in the store, send us advanced reading copies. So I can generally tell you what you should read that's coming out next month when I can remember the title.
Well, what's been something great that you've read this year, a 2020 book?
Okay. Hilary Mantel's, the last one in her series about Henry VIII, is really good. All three of those are excellent. She writes very well. Let's see here. Wolf Hall is one of those books. So that series is really good. If you're not, and this is a little bit older, but Station 11 is a really good book about a global pandemic. But it's a completely different. That's really good. I read a lot of nonfiction as well. There's a book about sort of a true murder mystery, also a serious history lesson about the Troubles in Ireland called Say Nothing. Robert Caro's multi-volume biography of LBJ is incredible. David McCullough's, anything by David McCullough, his biography of Truman. Well, how long do you have? I can go.
Those are all great suggestions. So hopefully one of those Sean will pick up and read as a recommendation. Do you find that there is a link between, I mean, I believe truly in like the link between like reading and writing, but do you find that if you're really into whatever you're reading at the moment, that it influences kind of where your writing goes?
I'm sure it does, because it makes you think of, it brings up topics you may not have thought of. And if you read something that's really good, actually, probably if it's not something, whatever you read, you're participating in, because you're using your senses and imagining, the settings, and you're doing the casting and such. So, yeah.
I like that idea. Yeah, doing the casting, which is true. Yeah. Well, what an amazing time tonight being able to share in your collection. Tell us again, title of the book, how we can find it, where we can get it, all those details.
Okay. It's called What Passes for Wisdom. It's at the printer now. The printer tells me by the end of the month it'll be out in bookstores or have copies. They say, like I say, Amazon, tui, we're having it. So, it'll be widely available. You can still pre-order it at Finishing Line Press now. So.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank everyone that's joined us. The Muse Writer Center offers hundreds of free literary events a year just like this. We have teacher readings, book launches, writing clubs, and much more. A recording of this live stream will be available on the Muse Facebook page, our YouTube page, and our website at themuse-org. the-muse.org after the event. Many events coming up throughout the rest of October and November. Next Friday, I'm going to promote a reading and a book launch by Amanda Gomez. She's celebrating the launch of her chapbook with us through a virtual reading like Bill did. Throughout October and November, our virtual series Diversity 2020, Dynamic Voices for Change, will continue. We'll be hosting a number of free, exciting literary events there. So to learn more or become a sponsor, check out the events tab at the-muse.org. I'm also teaching a class that starts this fall. It starts next Monday, Introduction to Poetry, so feel free to check that out too. We thank you, Bill Ayres, for your words, for your wisdom and your poetry, and for launching your book with us. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who's watching. Anything else you want to say, Bill?
Thank you so much, Kendrick. Thank you, Sean. Amanda Gomez is very, very good. Check her out next week. I'm very impressed by her.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you in a virtual event very soon.